The Carpenter and the Cradle. A History Weaver Adventure, Book 1, by Connie Worden. Read by the author. Chapter 24. June stretched on her back and looked at the clouds. She and July had just returned moments ago from the picnic they'd planned with Coral and Fern. A picnic with the triple purposes of having a picnic, exploring a hole in the ground, and brainstorming what their next steps should be in the hunt for Georgie's whereabouts. They hadn't made any noticeable headway on the last project, although a few unrealistic ideas had been tossed around. After all, renting a bloodhound to catch Georgie's scent from the shed and then track her to whoever knows where wasn't likely to work, or be in any way feasible. Where could one rent a bloodhound anyway? Will's discovery of the hidden objects largely hijacked the purpose of the picnic as far as discussion after the exploration went. But there was really nothing to be learned about that mystery either. Everyone came up dry, even on guessing about what the hole in the ground was and what the objects were doing in it or what they were. There was one other unexpected thing that had resulted from the picnic, for June at least. When they'd walked Coral home, Will had been out in the yard sawing a board with a handsaw. June had waved and he had come over to say hi to the group of girls. Was it her wave that had brought him over? What did Will think about her? He was one of the best-looking people June had ever seen, she decided. Nothing like the boys she'd grown up with and went to school with. They were all ridiculously ordinary. Will was, well, new. But what did he think of her? It had been after she'd waved that he came over after all. Did that mean anything? What do you think about, Coral's family, July? June asked her sister on the ground beside her, watching the sky change. Her voice was slow and lazy like the clouds above. Oh, no, you don't, June, not again. July abruptly rolled over to prop herself up onto her elbows so she could look intently into June's face. What? June said, sitting up, instantly on the defensive. You and your crushes. Weren't you just in love with, what was his name again? Dustin, something Justin or Dustin just last month? What happened to Justin/Dustin? It was Justin, and nothing happened to him, I don't imagine, June replied stiffly. I don't ever see him. He's from Cherryton. I only met him once at the park. He hasn't contacted me, so odds are I'll never see him again. Will lives right here, right next door, in fact. What's so strange about noticing a neighbor? That's quite normal. And a very good-looking neighbor, who happens to be the brother of a good friend. It was bound to happen. The question is, do you think he might have noticed me? Apparently, July had nothing to say. Her only answer was silence. Oh, July, don't tell me. Well, July said. It was her turn to sound defensive. As you said, what's so strange about noticing a neighbor? It was bound to happen. Oh, no, June groaned. Why does this always happen to us? Probably because we're twins, July said, without sounding unduly upset. After all, it was hardly the first time, and maybe it was to be expected. Even though we look nothing alike and we are nothing alike, well, not very much alike, in most ways at least, we are still twins. I guess we're bound to think alike on some things. Why couldn't we have other things in common besides the guys we like? June grumbled. Later that day, the girls were assembled in June and July's bedroom, clustered again around the computer screen. This time they were searching for recent missing persons photos from their region of BC, combined with the name Victoria or Vicky with an I or Vicky with a Y. We should have thought of this in the first place, June grumbled. Well, all right, we thought of it now, so good for us, July said generously. She didn't mention that we really meant me. We'll see if anything comes of it, though, before we get too excited, right? Simultaneously, the girls drew in a breath. Georgie's face appeared as if by magic in a thumbnail picture on the search page. There she is, Fern said softly. Quick, click on it, June commanded, bouncing up and down on the balls of her feet and smacking July rapidly on both her shoulders that happened to be in front of her as she leaned over her sister's head, breathing down her neck excitedly. Would you stop, June? Come on, you beating me black and blue isn't going to speed up our agonizingly slow internet speed any. Do you not think I've clicked on it? It's loading. Get off already. Victoria Stone. Coral read out loud after the picture and information underneath it became legible. And she disappeared from Penhurst as the last place of residence. Penhurst, that's not too far away. Do you think she may have tried going back there? It lists her parents as James McKay of Penhurst. That must be the wicked stepfather, do you think? June asked for confirmation. Plainly, July snapped, considering both her real parents are dead. Victoria Stone, originally of St. George's Green, Scotland. Georgie Green, the four girls shouted together. I'm guessing it must be what the locals call their town, a kind of town nickname, Coral said under her breath, continuing to read the words on the screen while making her guess. Very likely. It must have been on Georgie's mind in her dazed state. She must have been thinking of home as she came to from the accident, was Fern's comment. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, June said triumphantly. Ju, quick, look up St. George's Green, Scotland, see where it is, the population, anything you can learn about it, and then we can search out James McKay of Penhurst and see what we can learn about him. Gee, June, never would have thought of that, July said sarcastically. Now would you stop breathing your salsa breath down my neck? I'm not finished reading everything this site has to say about Georgie. I wonder what brought Georgie and her stepfather, or maybe we should start calling her Victoria finally, to Penhurst, British Columbia, Canada, of all places, all the way from Georgie Green, Coral mused out loud to no one in particular. If I were to make a guess, which I suppose is what I'm doing, I'd guess James must be Canadian. Somehow he met and married Georgie's mum. I'm going to keep calling her Georgie. She said she didn't mind, and it's just how I think of her. Anyway, I bet he met and married her mum in Scotland and they moved to Canada after they were married. Or maybe he just brought Georgie here after her mum died when he wanted to get back home to Canada. Something like that. No doubt, July. Bet you're right. The stepdad is probably originally Canadian, not Scottish, Coral said. Yep. Although I have an idea of my own, June said smugly. She felt it happened so seldom that she arrived at a conclusion before her quicker-witted twin. She couldn't help a little pride at the thought. I bet it hasn't been long since they moved to Penhurst, and you know why? 'Cause of that gum. It's from the UK, it's not Canadian. I'm sure she dropped the package because she knew we'd find it, and it was the only thing she could think of at the time to signal us that something wasn't right about her disappearance. You know what I can't figure out, though? How could we discover this picture on the internet so easily, and the cops and the social services people with all their amazing databases didn't see it and learn who Georgie really was? Fern wondered. Well, look at the date, July pointed out. This wasn't posted until recently. This was put up after she'd left Lady Cromarty's. I suppose the stepdad finally decided to make it public that his stepdaughter was a missing person. Maybe the neighbors started asking too many questions that he couldn't answer, or there was somewhere she was supposed to be that she hadn't shown up. Before that, he had some other story about where she was, off visiting relatives or something. But that's just me spitballing. I don't exactly know. Besides, as to why we could find her on the internet when the RCMP haven't identified her yet, so far as we know, don't forget, we had the advantage of knowing her real first name to start the search with. We're the only ones who also know Georgie as Victoria, remember? July said. Well, here's something else to think about that makes June's theory that the stepfather moved both of them to Penhurst just a short time ago more likely. Because think about this, why didn't anyone in Penhurst recognize Georgie's pictures from the news reports that were in the Beaver Row Bugle and the Cheriton Clarion? They should have if anyone knew her in Penhurst. But I bet she ran away from him very shortly after they moved to Penhurst. That's why no one suspected him when his stepdaughter went missing. Probably no one knew there was a stepdaughter at all, if they'd both just newly arrived in town. So, no one would have thought anything of it if there suddenly was no stepdaughter. If he'd succeeded, I mean, in, you know. And that's why no one from Penhurst recognized her from the news reports on her. It was a very long speech for Fern, and she looked excited. Her eyes were glowing and her cheeks had a slight flush. Coral looked at her and had to agree with her brother that Fern was a very pretty girl, especially when she was more animated than usual, as she was at the moment. Yup, makes sense, Fern. I bet that's exactly right. And maybe he reported her missing well after the fact, after he lost all track of her, because he realized he'd need police help to trace her so he could get his hands on her again, July concluded. Okay, are you not finished reading that yet? June demanded impatiently. Let's get moving. I want to know more about St. George's Green and James McKay. Maybe wedding notices or something from St. George's Green would have something about James McKay and somebody or other Stone. Too bad we don't know Georgie's mom's first name. Okay, yes, I'm working on it, June. Seriously, get off my back. Literally, you're digging your bony elbows in again.